and you're tuned to TNSradio.com. Scottish Sovereign Gary with you until 11 p.m. at least. On the line with us we have Clif from, let me just get that's halfpasthuman.com. Clif, are you there with us?
Yeah, that's correct. Halfpasthuman.com, yes.
Yeah, well, welcome to TNSradio.com. It's an absolute privilege and honour to have you on the show tonight. Clif, can we start off by, you know, as we were talking just off air there's a lot of people not completely familiar with your work and what it entails, and I know that it comes back to, is it about 2001 is when it first started?
Actually, the idea came to me in 1993, and it took me perhaps nearly a decade to get the software really refined. So, but I started producing reports and results in 97 or 98. And basically the work I do is to take shifts in language, how people on the internet express themselves in text in a normal, everyday way, and analyze it for patterns at what I call a woo-woo level. And basically that's this side of fortune telling. Or future viewing, so to speak. So it's an unproven, and I would hate to characterize it as a science. At this stage, it's certainly more of an art and a craft than anything. But we're better than twice what chance should allow. So it does have its use.
Sure. So you're taking it back to the 90s there, but was the first result in 2001?
No, actually the first results started coming in. I did my first run in 1997. The idea struck me in 93. I noodled it while I was working for Microsoft, doing other programming for them. I had this thing running around in the back of my mind for a few years. And then in like 95, I started working on the software in a language called Prolog, which curiously, I got a really good version of Prolog out of Logic Programming Associates out of London. Great people there. Clive Steele and a bunch of radical hardcore programmers have produced a pure Prolog that runs on a PC. And Prolog is a very interesting programming language because it can compile itself. It can change itself on the fly based on conditions that you set as you go ahead and program with it. So it's self-adapting. And I had this idea to suck down vast quantities of text off the internet and compare it for change in patterns of word usage in regular conversations. And in order to do that, I needed to filter vast quantities of text, and so Prolog turned out to be a very good control language for all of the little operational software, which I really set working in 97, and I came up with a few interesting bits and pieces of information that started me thinking that I really did have something here, and I pursued it. And then effectively, yeah, we came out with our first publicly posted, never been removed forecast, if you will, under the idea of Screwy Theory 153, which I posted on George Ure's urbansurvival.com site, because I didn't have a site of my own. And it basically said within a short period of time, I think we detailed out 85 or 90 days, there was a percentage of, it was 100% certain in my opinion at the time, that an event would occur that would tip us over into a new way of being as a planet of humans running around. And it turned out, of course, that was prescient for the 9/11 event, which indeed did change our mental context of how we all are getting on since then. And so it was like, yeah, it just started showing that it had some worth if at least you could make plans or do something ahead of time based on the knowledge.
So basically, the system that you operate, the system that you use then, is basically just gathering and collating the data that you pick up from various points around the globe.
Yeah, you have a hobby. Your hobby is growing rutabagas and kumquats, and you go to the rutabaga and the kumquat gardening forum and keep up on your hobby, and you discuss your rutabagas and compare them to everybody else's and your neighbor Bob's kumquats, etc., in your discussions. And because you do this at a habitual level, weekly, daily, whatever, and you're like tens of millions of other humans, the question arises is why really should you use any different set of language one week than any other week? And so let me back up and I'll state my premise in a relatively straightforward manner,
Sure.
and you can sort of follow the train of thought that led me to write this screwy program. But basically the premise is that all humans are psychic. To some degree,
Hi,
some
welcome
greater,
back
some
to
less.
New Mexico with
Most
me at
humans don't know they're psychic. Most humans leak out their psychic impressions, whether they're aware that they're psychic or not, in the form of the language that they choose to use in any given situation ahead of a developing future that they may have some foreknowledge of. And that was my basic premise. And in order to gather basically what I wanted to do was to go out and gather the psychic impressions of tens upon millions of humans that are leaked out in their language choices. Then this gets back to a little bit of science. And the science of linguistics states that pretty much any given human in their native language will have internalized about 100,000 words. Most native English speakers slightly higher because of the language expansion factor, but so say 120,000 words are internalized by the average English speaker. They use, on average, really only about 25 or 30,000 words across the span of a whole year. They will delve out of that normal set of words for extraordinary circumstances. Even within that 25,000 or so words, a small fraction of their 120,000 vocabulary, from week to week, their business and social focus needs really dictate a further shrinkage to where they're really dealing at about 2,000 to 3,000 words that are used habitually and repetitiously. And then so it's relatively easy for me to, as a programmer, to write a program that can sweep and find the changes that are outside of those normal 2,000 to 3,000 words that are habitual within that particular kumquat and rutabaga examination forums. And then I say to myself, okay, now why are they using these particular adjectives, adverbs, etc. This particular week, when last week they were talking about the same rutabagas, only this week we have this shade into this new set of usually adverbs and adjectives. And I assign certain emotional values to these words, build a huge lexicon of now over 1 million words with values associated. And these words all resolve back to archetypes. And within the archetypes, I can then drill down and make forecast as to changes that I think are leaking out through people's being psychic and not knowing it. Boy, did any of that make sense?
Yeah, aye, definitely. I know that there's a degree of spirituality in all of us. You know, it's just waking up to that frequency. It's an awakening.
Correct. It's exactly a matter of frequency.
Yeah, it's an awakening process. Okay. Well, you know, if we go back to the 911 things that was predicted, or not predicted. Do you like to use the word predicted, or is it?
I like forecast.
Forecast.
But because I'm a linguist, and there's very specific nuances that are in subcontexts that are involved with language. So forecast is just better for me.
Right. Okay. Well, the forecast of the Twin Towers. Do you reckon they collapsed, or do you reckon they disappeared? Strange question, but I'll explain that in a second.
Do I reckon the collapse or what? Excuse me?
Or disappeared. Oh, okay.
I don't understand the question. I don't think.
Sure. Okay. All right. It was another show. We had a lady on, Dr. Judy Wood. I know that you've spoke about black ops.
I'm sorry. We're getting some kind of interference or breakup. It's a rhythmic. About every third word is coming through.
Okay. I don't know why that's happening. Can you hear me okay just now?
Okay. Now you're back. Okay.
Sure. As far as the 911 and the towers, you know, they collapsed. So what was the feedback from, like, your community of people who was looking at this information? What was that the big one? Because I know that it was classed as there was going to be a life changing event was going to be happening within the next, I think it was like 30 to 60 days or so.
Correct. It was a tipping point, and actually we were, hugely and greatly ignored.
Right. Well, um, so you talk about hyperchronism.
Yeah.
Can you explain what hyperchronism is for
Okay,
listeners?
I'm using the label hyper in this case to cover both the condition of hyper and hypo
Hmm.
when applied to time. Chronism being the mechanistic perception of time as opposed to the quality, which would be a karyos
Hmm.
of time. So we're looking at the human perception of time shifting in an abnormal way for an individual or group of individuals
Hmm.
and having a demonstrable physical proof that it was the time that changed and not merely the perception. In other words, it's not because you're a little bit hungover from the night before that time seems to be running particularly fast or particularly slow or in bursts or whatever. It is actually occurring thus around you.
Uh-huh.
And the premise on hyperchronism results from the fact that there is that people are performing time stuff concentration experiments in laboratories and in science facilities around the planet, very much like they're out there running around beaming up extremely low frequencies and ultra high frequencies into the ionosphere out of HARP kind of devices. There's also these individuals running around in labs
Hmm.
that are mucking about with time stuff in great quantity. And basically, they have the ability to lens time stuff and concentrate it or to build a little barrier against it and create less time stuff filtering through. The
Hmm.
problem is that that time stuff, because of the nature of the universe, which they do not understand,
Hmm.
they are creating side effects, and the side effects are the spillover, if you will, of this extra time stuff or the sudden lack of it as they sort of suck it out of the region around you.
Hmm.
If you thought for a minute of, you guys have mosquitoes in Scotland, I presume.
We have a version of them, yes.
Okay, in our area around here, if you were to set up some mechanism whereby you sucked all of the mosquitoes out of your backyard, the natural effect would be that you would draw mosquitoes from your neighbor's backyard. I'm presuming they would behave the same in Scotland. And the issue for us is that these time scientists don't understand that time stuff to a certain extent behaves like mosquitoes. If you take it away from this area, it's going to draw it because the universe wants to be equal and equalize things from other areas, thus causing these temporal disturbances, which we've labeled the human perception of as hyperchronism. And we've had a number of people reporting these without knowing what they were describing. And in many cases, it's like being at the very early stages of the alien abduction phenomenon, where people were saying, something happened to me, and I got this lump in the back of my head here, and I'm not really, and these scars, and I'm not really sure what happened. And they really didn't have the labels or the context in which to put their experience and perception. And we ran into that as a side effect of some of the work that we're doing here in aggregating all of this information.
Sure.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So,
And some people actually experience it as a lack of time, and we've had reports of it being quite odd. And here's a specific example that's occurred in one form or another in the areas around particular laboratories that, let's just say, might be in desert regions in continents such as the one I'm in here in North America.
uh-huh.
And in these desert regions, the roads are usually not quite so populated, and so you might drive for miles and see nothing more than local wildlife in the form of rattlesnakes or something.
Uh-huh.
And so it would be a real rarity to see a car pass you going the other direction, such that you would pay attention to it to some level that would be beyond being passed by a car in a city street. there's just that hyper level of awareness of reality around you because it's the first car you've seen in the last 20 minutes as you're